Okay, so welcome to today's webinar. The topic for today is challenges faced by women exporters under the COVID-19 pandemic. Our speakers for today are going to be Stephanie Sherrod, Andrea Ebert, Ifa Saida, Audrey Ross, and Lily Flores. And we're going to just begin with some brief introductions, and then the presentation should begin around 11:40. Just a reminder that if you're not speaking, if you could please mute yourself so that you're not disrupting the flow of the webinar as the presenters are speaking. And if you have any questions, please hold off your questions until the presentation is over. We encourage you to write your questions in the chat box and I will be monitoring them. So at the end of the presentation and the question and answer segment, I will read the questions to the presenters. So to begin with, just make sure that your sound is on mute, and to do that, you will see the little microphone icon at the bottom of the screen, and you just kind of click it and it mutes you and unmutes you. If you're having any problems with connectivity, you could just press my name and send me a private message and I can walk you through that. And lastly, if you could please take 5 minutes out of your day to just fill out a survey. We will send the survey out after the webinar has been completed, and we usually attach the survey with the link of the webinar recording as well, so you can have, so you can be able to rewatch it if you need it. But yeah, just fill out the survey because your feedback is very valuable to us. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker. Her name is Marisabel Gonzalez, and she's the Program Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as Trade Support Services. Marisabel has over 20 years of experience working in international trade, and she joined Tfo Canada back in 2008. She's been taking on new responsibilities, including trade support services, as well as becoming the program director for Latin America and the Caribbean. As the program director, she leads the implementation of different programs within the region, as well as for the trade support services. She's responsible for developing and leading the execution of Tfo Canada's Canadian market trade information services. So without further ado, Marisabel, over to you.
Thank you, Rosaline. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to share my screen and go quickly over the agenda we have for today. I hope everybody could see the agenda. Basically, it promised to be a very interesting session with practical examples. The whole idea here, as we always do with our webinars, is to guide the exporters to basically support the exporters in that way in their efforts to access the Canadian market. So here we are again, helping women exporters to understand much better how the Canadian import market is behaving now under the COVID-19. It seems it's going to stay. It's not something that we thought it was going to leave us in 2 months, back in 2020, March 20. So we need to adjust. We need to learn to live with this and find our ways to successfully enter the Canadian market. A special thanks to Stephanie Sherrod that I work with from OWIT. I work with her to coordinate this event. Also to Suzanne Baca, she's our regional rep, but is also a member of OWIT. And to our guest speaker, Andrea Ebert, and our panelist is Audrey Ross, Lily Flores, and Ifa Saida. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation and be here to share your experiences and share recommendations how to better do this, okay? Export to Canada. I'm going to share with you guys a brief presentation about what is Tfo Canada. It's gonna be brief, but just to refresh what we do, and for those, especially OWIT members that they don't know us, who we are and what we do. Can you see, everybody can see the screen, Rosalie? Yeah, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, So I just want to make sure because, okay. So basically who we are, the Trade Facilitation Office Canada, our mandate for more than 40 years has been the same. Tfo Canada improve lives through the creation of sustainable trade partnerships for exporters from developing countries with Canadian and foreign buyers. Okay, we were funded by the government of Canada. Actually, we were part of this international trade policy, international development in 1980, and then we became an NGO in 1985. Our headquarters are in Ottawa. We are a small team, 16 at the maximum. And we do have a regional representatives in key market in import markets in Canada, in Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. Right now, Susan Baca is our virtual regional rep covering all Canada at the moment. And when we get back to a new normal, we'll be able to have our 3 representatives in each province, do more physical and in-presence work. So our clients are 3 SMEs exporters from developing countries around the world, trade support institutions from developing countries, and also on this side, we have our Canadian buyers and international buyers. And Roseline, I can see some people trying to enter the waiting room right now. Sorry. Basically, our funding comes mainly from Global Affairs Canada, but we do have other partners that we work with, international and regional, and we also have implement projects and co-sharing by participants and with Canadian corporations. This is an example of our recent projects. As you can see, we are all over the world. We have different partners. Global Affairs, as I say, is our main funder. Right now, we are implementing the Women in Trade for Inclusive and Sustainable Growth and the Canadian SMO for Impact and Innovation. Those are 2 main projects that we are implemented, but as you can see, we have private partnerships with Tim Hortons, and we also work with other international organizations, as you can see here, ITFC, International Trade Center, IESC, and Canadian organizations such as QESO, IDRC, Co-Water. So it's a very diverse portfolio. We have 3 types of clients of users of our online services. The foreign suppliers or the exporters, we offer a few very detailed services for them. Our free online matchmaking service with the Canadian buyers. So every time an SME register with us, which is free of charge, we approve the registration, and if that company has an export offer, the system collects the information and we promote online that export offer to a Canadian buyer, the Canadian buyers in the sectors. So let's say that's what we call a free online matchmaking. We do it through our info bulletin that goes once a month to all the Canadian buyers that are registered with us. We offer more than 21 market information papers, updated information on each sector. So the company that registered with us, the exporter that registered with us, has access to the information on how this specific import market behaves in Canada. Our famous Access to Canada handbook, most of the SMEs visit this. I call it the Bible because it's a very, very in-depth handbook with information on how to export to Canada, how to get ready to export to Canada. We also offer a quarterly Exporting to Canada newsletter. The next one is coming up, actually next week on the 28th. The idea of the quarterly Exporting to Canada newsletter is to keep updated and inform the SME and the trade support institution from developing countries of what's going on in the Canadian import market. For instance, with all this COVID-19, what is changing, what are the new trends? This is what we try to keep them informed so they can be successful if they have to make changes, adjustment to these export strategies. And webinars like today free of charge for those SMEs registered with us and on different topics related to the Canadian import market. On the other side of the coin, we have more than 1,500 Canadian buyers registered with us in different sectors, not traditional sectors. So we offer to them the foreign supplier database. So when you register with us, there's a beautiful supplier database by country, by sector that we offer. That Canadian buyer, if he's interested to find a product, they could go type the HS code, type the product name, and they will find suppliers from all over the world that they could contact. So we had some success stories based on this contact done through the website and the database. We offer the Canadian buyers client country profiles to educate them more about those markets abroad, market links, and also, as I mentioned, the info monthly bulletin once a month. For the trade support institutions, our services online are basically the same listed on for the foreign suppliers, plus they have access to the supplier database for their own countries. They have also promotion of their what they do in on the info bulletin once a month. So right now we are featuring all the trade support institutions that are working with us under different projects to the Canadian buyers, so they know that besides us, they have someone to go in their countries to find support in order to find products and companies. And we also offer the promotion of key trade events in their own countries. Quickly, our information services, I already mentioned, Access Canada Handbook, market information papers, Export to Canada newsletters, webinars, and a broad updated content that is available on our website. Advice is more related to the projects that we implement in the countries. So we pre-implement trade capacity building projects. We train and support trade support institutions and SMEs, especially trade support institutions, to better provide services to those SMEs, to their clients, focus on the Canadian market. We offer market familiarization tours as part of this also trade capacity building to SMEs and trade support institutions. We visit major markets in Canada, such as Montreal and Toronto, different sectors, to get that real experience to the SMEs after we train them, to reality check, I call it, when they come and see how their products are showcased here, what is the price, packaging and label. This is what we show in those markets familiarization tours. And we offer also under a program, MBA program that we have with Canadian universities, we offer the chance to SMEs exporters ready to export to the Canadian market, the opportunity to have market entry studies tailored to their needs. And the market entry studies could cost up until 15,000 Canadian dollars. We offer them for free to SMEs beneficiary of our projects that are export ready. They have the product, they want to enter the Canadian market. The contact, we have online promotion of export product offers to offer over 1,500 Canadian importers that are registered with us. We coordinate and organize trade missions. We connect, it could be Canadian buyer missions going to the countries or SMEs exporters coming here. It could be virtual or in person. And we also coordinate trade missions around trade shows. We arrange these B2B meetings agendas with Canadian buyers. We build the capacity of the companies in the sector of the market import, the Canadian import market. So to support the companies to be successful when they export to Canada. This is our website to finish. Right now, we are in the process to change the website to a new one. So hopefully in October, we will have a new one in place. But right now, this is our current website. I encourage you to visit, to register with us, to benefit from all this information, we have it available in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French. And if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me or Roseline, and we will be very happy to help you and guide you in this process to enter the Canadian market. Having said that, I'd like to introduce now Stephanie, who is going to talk a little bit about OWIT and the services. Stephanie, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome. My name is Stephanie Sherrod, and I am the current co-vice president of programs for the Organization of Women in International Trade, or OWIT. OWIT is a global organization for women in international trade and business. We have over 2,000 members in 24 chapters, including Latin America, Africa, and we also have a virtual chapter if there's not a chapter near you. We impact hundreds of millions of dollars in trade and business transactions annually. OWIT provides our members educational and developmental webinars on a broad variety of topics, including issues specific to women's roles in those fields. OWIT's strength is the global expertise of its members and our chapters all across the world. I invite you to visit our website, www.owit.org, and to also join our mailing list so that you can receive our newsletter, Connect, as well as all our OWIT international news and announcements. You can also become one of our OWIT corporate or business sponsors on our OWIT website for 1 year. We are always interested in ideas for speakers and upcoming webinar topics, so please feel free to reach out to anyone at OWIT International, feedback or suggestions for future topics and events. Please stay connected with us through OWIT's international Facebook page, our LinkedIn group, and you can also follow us on Twitter. If you have any further questions about OWIT or learning more about OWIT, please email bp-programs@owit.org. And now I'd like to introduce one of our speakers, Andrea Ebert. She's a global trade law expert in customs and trade. She's the founder and CEO of Develop Trade Law, LLC. She works with businesses, governments, and individuals to facilitate the successful movement of goods and services across national borders. She's an experienced international trade attorney and policy advisor. She also consults for governments on the World Trade Organization roles, the development of WTO trade policy and laws, trade relations with the US, regional integration initiatives, and other trade issues. She's passionate about supporting women and women-owned SMEs, and also to help them participate effectively in the global marketplace. She's the author of several published books and articles, and she also has the Develop Trade Law blog on trade policy, and she speaks there on issues of relevance to developing countries and to small businesses. She's an accomplished speaker. She has workshops on the legal do's and don'ts of doing business internationally. She supports companies, particularly small businesses, and in developing a cost-effective trade compliance program for doing business internationally. She's an active member of several professional organizations. She's also a past president of the Organization of Women in International Trade, and she's a current board member of Women Own Law. Thank you so much, and I look forward to our presentations today.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I hope folks can hear me. So my thanks to Tfo Canada and to OWIT International for this opportunity today. I'm very pleased to see that the partnership between the two organizations, the two entities, continue and to deliver programming on topics such as the ones we're having today. And I'm very, very pleased to have been asked to join, and along with distinguished colleagues. So in my time, I'm going to cover 4 topics, 4 main subtopics, so to speak. Take a look at the impact of the pandemic on women traders in general, women exporters. Take a look at what's happening a little bit more closely with women in developing economies. Explore the ability of women exporters, traders, to pivot. That new term that came up as a result, well, it's not new, but started being used in the context of the pandemic. In other words, to come out on top and to begin to take advantages of opportunities that may have been presented during the COVID. And then some thoughts on recovery, what that might look like for those who have been impacted. To understand how women traders have been impacted by the global pandemic and the shutdown, it helps to understand the pre-COVID situation. Because the pandemic and the lockdown have, for the most part, exacerbated pre-existing gender disparities and the resulting challenges that women face on the home front and at work. In this case, of course, we're focused on women entrepreneurs in international business and trade. Briefly, what is gender disparity? It refers to the unequal treatment or to perceptions of individuals based on their gender, and gender is essentially a socially constructed stereotype that in turn leads to stereotypical roles. Men are construction workers, women are nurses. You can fill in the blanks, I'm sure. Women are not good at business. They should stay home and take care of the family and the kids. And we know that these stereotypes continue to pertain in a number of countries and families. So what are some of the characteristics of these gender inequalities in the pre-COVID world that impacted women in trade? In the context of formal education and training, we have lower access in many countries for women and girls. 60 years ago, almost 50% of women had no formal schooling, and their average level of educational entertainment was just 3.3 years. By 2010, only 20% of adult women fell into that category of having had no formal schooling, and their average attainment had increased to 7.7 years. But seriously, is that enough progress? Particularly when we look at the information technology that is driving the fourth industrial revolution, and that, as we will see, as we have ourselves experienced, has been key to helping companies emerge with minimum damage from the pandemic. A second characteristic is their disproportionate representation in the informal, unregulated sector. Up to, in some countries, 80% of women are operating in that economy are cross-border traders. And what does that mean, essentially? Think about the situation where, in a number of developing economies in particular, a woman will get a start through, in Jamaica, we call it a partner arrangement, right? So you have a group of women who get together once a week, they put in some money, whatever it is that they can afford, and then they each take in turns to draw from that pot. And this is how they're able to get, in the absence of, access to finance, which is another characteristic of these gender inequalities, to get some startup capital. And because this cross-border trading requires such small startup capital, this is what draws women into these sectors. So they may buy some goods, put them in a couple of suitcases, travel across the border to another country, sell them, and then buy with the profits they get, buy some additional products, more products, bring them back home, and then trade. And then in this marginal kind of way, operate as traders. As I said, women make up the largest share of these informal traders. In some countries, as much as 80%. The fact that they're informal means that they are very often not in the crosshairs of policymakers. They're not regulated. They don't register, they don't pay taxes, etc. And it can be very challenging to collect data on this group, which in turn challenges the development of policy. I alluded to the challenge with respect to accessing finance. Finance, as we know, is the lifeblood of any business. It's how you get started. It's how you sustain the business, how you grow, scale up. It's how you find reserves to weather crises like the ones that we're going through and to respond to opportunities that may emerge. And the World Bank has estimated that in 2017, worldwide, a $300 billion gap, that's billion with a B, in financing existed for formal woman-owned small businesses. So not to mention the informal businesses, and that more than 70%, 70% of women-owned SMEs had inadequate or no access to financial services. In other words, they didn't have a bank. And if you don't have a banking relationship, then it becomes extremely challenging, if not impossible, to access finance. And then, of course, something that needs no explanation, the women bear the lion's share of home and childcare responsibilities, something that also became all too evident during the pandemic. So how did the pandemic exacerbate these pre-existing challenges? I think it's helpful to start from a really personal place. I'm going to ask you to let's take a step back and recall what it was like in March, April, May, June, July of last year when the world shut down, essentially. So help me by just putting in the chat some of the realities that you yourself faced and had to address during the 2020 pandemic lockdown. Just put some things in the chat, whatever comes to mind, whether it's on the personal level or on the, as a business operator. Let's get a little bit of interactivity going here. This is the only time I'm going to ask you to do any work. I'll do most of the talking after this. Are we seeing anything here? Okay, clients unable to pay for services, limited access to raw materials. Absolutely. All right, well, all projects were canceled, which means, of course, no money coming in. Absolutely. There were some benefits, right? Attended a lot more webinars, uncertainty as to whether customers and additional childcare, closed schools, etc. Now, thank you very much for all of these. So you've touched on the essence, shortage of essential items. Remember going to the stores? I don't know what it was like in other countries, not being able to find toilet paper of all things. Kids at home, and so childcare responsibilities exploded. That's even if you didn't have to become their teachers. Remember how offices and facilities closed down, the irregular hours of operation, sometimes even the bank. I know my bank for a while, I couldn't access it. Travel came to a halt. Borders were closed. And then what were some of the ways that you coped? Someone mentioned webinars, right? So we know that one of the things we did was to turn more to the online environment once we had recovered from the shock of things. And we started to shop more online. If you are a provider, you started to put your offerings online or begin to figure out how to do that. You may have had the experience of starting to see a favorite supplier begin to communicate with you, or maybe for the first time set up a website or activate it or expand their social media presence. So that was the pandemic and just the shock of it. So that we all experienced both at the personal level and for those of us in business at the business level. So imagine some specifics then on what that period would have looked like for the woman trader and the more long-term impact. So people mentioned projects stopping, no uncertainty around your clients, etc. So business stopped because of the closures. Closed borders, if you're an exporter or a trader, meant you could not travel. And then the data shows that a larger share of women provide services to tourists and business travelers. So all of that dried up or slowed to a trickle. So if you're for a number of businesses already operating marginally, of course, revenue dries up. And then business also stopped as priorities shifted to the home front. There were just not enough hours in the day to look after children, teach them, cook, clean, and then on top of all of that, grasp and begin to strategize about how to weather this crisis. And then all businesses were impacted by the disruptions in supply chain, production, sourcing, shipping, right? Economies began to prioritize the production of essential goods and services. And if you happen to be already in that line of, in that sector, and once you figured out, again, how to work around a number of the challenges that we talked about, then you probably had a field day. And I do have some clients, food suppliers, etc. Yeah, their business boomed. But we do know, again, the data shows us that for many women traders, exporters, that is not the case. And so limited supplies meant the ability to source inputs as before, even if you were able to operate. And then now that supplies are returning, we see that they're coming at much higher prices. So the underlying question is, as well, is a woman trader able to continue even at the level that she was operating at before COVID?
Venga, aquí.
These realities were further exacerbated in developing countries where, higher percentage of cross-border traders in the informal sector or in travel-related services, which were impacted by closed borders, lack of access to formal education, which in a number of countries includes also, in some countries includes low literacy rates. There are some African countries, for example, at which just under 50% of adult women are literate. And then there are, across developing countries, there tend to be bigger challenges with accessing finance for just about all SMEs and MSMEs. I thought I would bring a little bit of some anecdotal evidence here through by sharing a conversation that I had with Deborah of Nigeria, a really dynamic woman who has founded an organization, a business association, Women in Trade and Services, which to serve women traders in West Africa. Most of her members are informal traders. And I asked her to share with me what were the experiences of her members during this, in weathering the COVID pandemic and the lockdown. And she highlighted 3 areas, which I will briefly share, trying to capture some of the images she shared. Obviously, there are illustrations that are not limited to the African realities. The first thing she said, no surprise, no time for business. Because of the lockdown, everyone was at home. And then in Africa, as in many other parts of the world, where people live in extended families, that may mean not just the husband and wife and their children were at home, but also the husband's father, mother, aunt, sister, big families with only one person, the woman trader, expected to take care of everyone's needs, to buy the supplies, to cook huge meals, which take a lot of time, to care for the sick, to become, in her words, the equivalent of a professional maid, taking care of everybody except yourself. And the result was no time for business. Most of her members, the association members, are processors who could no longer produce. Most of these businesses are solopreneurs, so they have no employees and they do most of the work. If you're a trader, you could no longer travel as the borders were closed. And in all cases, really, responsibilities on the home front overshadowed everything else. A second thing that she highlighted was a sharp increase in domestic violence. And this, of course, was not limited to Africa. We know that it is an unfortunate reality of life for a lot of women. And we know that these incidences of domestic violence increased during the pandemic as the anger, frustration, depression from losing your income sources, from the uncertainty of all of that, very often got taken out on women. And for the victim, imagine having to add to the other pressures, the mental and the need to find the mental and emotional energy to survive and live with all of this. And then the third thing she mentioned was the challenges around pivoting to e-commerce. Remember, we talked about, and we experienced that this ability to move on to e-commerce was important in weathering the pandemic. She said that there were programs like She Trades, give them their props, which introduced many of her members to e-commerce, how to do digital ads, how to begin meeting clients online. But for those women without formal education, some of them even unable to read, this became yet another challenge, yet another obstacle that limited or even prevented them from being able to make that pivot. So that word again, what about the ability of women traders in general to pivot and take advantage of, well, to recover and take advantage of opportunities that may have been presented? Deborah, for example, says that for those of her members who were able to read, it was very helpful as they began to take appointments and bookings online, expanded their ability to use WhatsApp, and business grew, and a number of them have been able to start turning things around. At the same time, we know that women are disproportionately represented in those sectors requiring face-to-face interactions: tourism, retail, cross-border trading. And what about the ability to switch operations to meet the demand in new areas? Remember when we couldn't, first there was a question of, do we need masks? And then when it became clear that we were supposed to wear masks, but we could not get the industrially produced ones, all of a sudden, everybody was producing masks. Well, maybe somebody can produce, 10 masks. What does it take to get your masks on Etsy or to scale, etc.? So in those situations, certainly the lack of access to finance is going to be a limiting factor. So what's the result? This information is a little old because it takes a little while to collect data. But a May 2020 global survey of entrepreneurs showed that worldwide, 26% of businesses were non-operational in May of 2020. And that female-owned businesses were 5.9 percentage points more likely to have closed their businesses than male-owned businesses. And the question is, were these closures temporary or permanent? And how are these businesses, how are our women exporters going to be able to recover and not just get back to pre-COVID levels, but continue to grow beyond? And so I want to highlight 3 ways forward. One, continue to identify and address the market access barriers that women traders face as they work to dig themselves out of this crisis. There is a World Bank report on this whole issue. It highlights the need to make trade policy more responsive to gender concerns. And from some of the work I've done, I know that this begins at the negotiating table, all the way up to implementation of trade agreements. And that's a whole discussion for another session. But I will note also that in looking for data, as I mentioned, because of the nature of your informal traders, that data covers formal entities. And so a lot of what's happening with our informal, unregulated women traders may yet still not be known. And so I think one of the ways that one of the ways forward is to begin to work with organizations, these business support organizations, identify these organizations, and they're emerging, growing, that are working with these traders to begin to collect data on the informal economy. But really, trade facilitation is where the rubber hits the road for women exporters. And we need to make it work for women, particularly those engaged in informal cross-border trade, as well as even if they are engaged in formal trade, but doing trade in smaller volumes that just do not support the amount of paperwork and the number of procedures and processes that have to be completed. So simplification of border procedures and border requirements. Sensitization, training your border officials so that they understand what these challenges are and are equipped to support women as they work with these hopefully simplified procedures. Educating the women so that they know their rights. And then really addressing the issue around the harassment and which can extend to violence of rape, corruption that a number of these women have to face, and as providing a safe place to report such instances when they occur. And this is just for starters in the area of trade facilitation. And then finally, we know that there were sectors that thrived during the pandemic. Like any crisis situation, opportunities were created. There was a demand for new products or old products made in new ways, masks, right? Nearshoring is also a huge opportunity. And then meanwhile, nearshoring, for those who may not be familiar with that, means addressing the current global supply chain situation where your supplier or various suppliers, you may be sourcing inputs from the other side of the world, and then bringing them all together just in time for warehousing or retail. And we know that even predating the pandemic, we know that the reliance on Chinese suppliers had become problematic because of the US-China tariff war, for example. But there are reports that companies are saying that they're unable to find replacement for Chinese suppliers. And so they continue to rely on these traditional relationships that they have. And so I believe there is a role for policymakers, business support organizations, trade support organizations, and women organizations like OIT to do the following three things and more. First, help women entrepreneurs to learn about and see possibilities as they emerge. What are cutting edge needs? What are cutting edge technologies that are needs in particular that the market is going to be trying to, or challenges that the market is going to be trying to solve? Secondly, for policymakers to provide incentives for those companies seeking new suppliers, new partners, to connect with women and entrepreneurs ready for that opportunity. In other words, yes, there are traditional relationships that have existed, but let's see if we can take a look at this new challenge that has arisen because of what will be the growing demand for companies, global companies including, to start locating their suppliers and their relationships closer to home. And then thirdly, for business support organizations, trade support organizations, to position themselves as a point of contact and to begin to educate these companies that are searching for these new relationships on the advantages of working with their members, with their clients, who may be untried, yes, but are often more agile, more thirsty, and probably even less expensive very often. Now, in conclusion, it's about putting in place policies and programs so that those persons, in particular women, with the vision, drive, knowledge, and skills to become the next innovators in whatever sphere are able to not are able to succeed and to thrive. Thank you very much. And I'm open to any questions during the Q&A that follows.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this important information, key information. And I love the fact that it was practical. So it's real cases, so we can learn a lot from this. If the audience have any Q&A, please leave it until the end of the session. Right now, I'd like to move to the panel session. Susan Bacan, our regional representative, will be moderating the panel. Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Marie-Sabelle. The panel has 3 participants offering different perspectives on importing products into Canada. So in the interest of time, I will just introduce them briefly because you received all of their full bios. So first of all, we have Audrey Saida, who is the commercial attaché with the Embassy of Indonesia in Ottawa. And she has over a decade of experience in trade, holding key government positions in Indonesia. As part of the office in charge of supporting Indonesian SME exporters to enter the Canadian market, Audrey will share the main challenges that she has when guiding SMEs in the importing process into Canada, and how COVID has changed her support to these exporters. Then we also have Audrey Ross, who is a logistics and customs specialist with Orchard Custom Beauty in Toronto. And she deals with the import-export process and trade compliance for a global supply chain in many different countries. Audrey is also VP Secretary of OIT on the International Board. And thirdly, we'll have Lily Flores, who is the Director of Procurement with New Alaska in Montreal, Quebec, which provides frozen fruits and veggies to the industrial, food service, and retail sectors. And her perspective is one of an importer bringing fruits and vegetables into Canada. She'll address challenges with foreign providers and internal challenges in Canada. And then, sorry, I think I forgot to mention that Audrey's perspective will be a more, technical one on the issues at Canadian ports that are making it difficult for buyers to import products, especially from long distances. So we will start with you, Aoife. Can you, mention, what would be the main requests for support that you receive from SME exporters from Indonesia?
Thank you, Moderator Ibu Susan Baka. And first of all, I would like to say very good afternoon for you all, and also the participants here and the panelists, also the guest speaker. And it is a pleasure to be here today. And thank you, Tfo Canada, as well as OIT, for inviting me and organizing this webinar. As a trade representative office, during the pandemic, I received emails from Indonesian exporters, and most of them are SMEs actually. Most of their requests or their questions are they want to promoting a product to Canadian market, of course. That is the first one. And the second one is they want us to provide potential buyer data, as well as maybe validate the buyer's status, the facilitating virtual business matching as well. And also the third is they usually ask about the regulation to enter Canadian market because, as the COVID pandemic, some of country have more restrictive in some of regulation for importations. And actually that the three of issues that already I mentioned before is the most that our SME acts. And they also actually want us to provide like a promoting promotions, products, events, or like you know, the virtual promotions, because you know, since the COVID, actually we have to sift between the in-person promotions into the virtual promotions for trade exhibitions. That is one of the most also they wanted us to do. I mean, because in Indonesia, particularly, most of 90% of business entity is categorized as SME. That's why we are as trade representative try to promote through the digital means. Actually, we use our promotions from social media. For examples, we promote every day every product, and usually we ask our SME exporters to come up with some company profile as well as the catalog, so we can promote in our social media like Instagram or Facebook or any other means. We also held like, you know, like promotions, trade promotions. But since the promotion is shift from the in-person into the virtual promotions, it is one of our big challenge as well, because you know, when we involve the SME to become participants in international exhibitions virtually, we have to equip them with the technical what should I call, the technical means, how to upload the catalog, how to maybe make the digital brochure, and as well as the internet connection that in Indonesia, you know, that somehow it's not really stable. That is Ibu Susan.
And so in terms of what's different that now than it was in pre-COVID time, so would you say more of the requests now are related to how they can deal in the whole, you know, kind of virtual economy?
Yeah, of course, the virtual is something that we have to adapt with it right now during the COVID pandemic. You know, usually they also ask about the potential buyers. And this is also one of challenges also for us, because we have to introduce their product to the potential buyers, and we also have to like make a presentation, of course, for the on behalf of the SME. And if the buyers maybe have an interest, we can facilitate with some like a virtual business matching. And as an additional information, somehow during the COVID, I also received several inquiries from Canadian importer here that usually they come to Indonesia to meet a supplier and to also to find the supplier. And then because of the pandemic, the Canadian importer cannot go to Indonesia, of course, because of the restrictions. And then they ask me or us, the embassy, to like set up or to find the appropriate exporter that maybe meet with their requirements. And we can and we try to find it, and we try to facilitate the virtual business matching. Yeah, that's one of the activity that we facilitate as a trade representative. And I just also would like to highlight one program that we try to promote the export, the SME for exportations. We call it the Export Accelerated Program to Amazon Marketplace. This project is aimed to facilitate facility for selected vendor on Indonesian SME and it will assist selected vendor to develop their product to compete in the North American market. And we already launched the Archipelago store on Amazon Canada Marketplace on 10 December 2020. This is one of our program or our activity to support the SME during the pandemic. We introduced them with the the marketplace means.
Okay, and can you just, Aoife, tell us what are the main kinds of products or services that that come from Indonesian SME women exporters?
Usually, it's during the pandemic, you know that food and beverages is the most essential need for us. And currently, the export from Indonesia on food and beverages also raised to Canada, as well as the home decor and furnitures, because our activity is only at home, and then we focus only maybe cooking, also gardening or renovating our room design. Yeah, that is the two product that show raising from Indonesia, the trade data from based on our trade data actually.
Okay. And so you mentioned that one of the things that you've had to do differently during the pandemic was to help Canadian importers, buyers who approached you to help them find suppliers. Is there anything else that you had to do differently under COVID to assist your exporters to access the Canadian market? I mean, compared to what you were doing before the pandemic?
Actually, we also bring some of the SME to the virtual promotions, to the virtual trade exhibitions. That is one of our program as well, that a bit different before the pandemic.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Aoife. It's very interesting, and the way that
I maybe just highlighted the last question, my last interventions, that right now the SME should be equipped with the ability to adapt with the digital means. I mean, they have to equip themselves with the technical in making like a digital brochure, as well as if they want to get some access, like for example, for, the Export Accelerated program that we already set up, they have to fulfill what we already require in that Export Accelerated programs to the Amazon Marketplace. And that is one of the main program, our program as a trade representative in Canada. I just want to highlight that is one of the main program or activity that we introduce to support our SME to enter into Canadian market or North American market.
Okay. And then where do they go for more information on that, or how, to find out if they can participate in that?
Okay, usually we set up some roadmap on that program, we
Mhm.
disseminate it first because this is like a cooperation between the trade representative in Canada as well as the
Okay.
Ministry of Trade in Jakarta, of course, and we make like a dissemination to particular group of SME, and we try to select them if they are is fulfill our requirement, of course, and after that we get like selections program. We also reviewing the program, reviewing the product, I mean, and its packaging, like a business coaching.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like a several roadmap we
Right.
have set up to
Right.
fulfill I mean SME to fulfill the program.
Okay.
And
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to Audrey now in the interests of
Thank
time, and we appreciate all of your input. I'm sure there might be some questions for you. So, Audrey, I'm moving on now to you, onto the sort of the whole logistics side. What would you say have been the most, like the major impacts of COVID on the whole transportation and logistics sector that affect the Canadian import market?
Yeah.
And if you could provide some real life or practical examples, that's always appreciated.
For sure. Thanks so much, Susan, for having me. I think everyone who, if you're here and following TFO, you're in the right place to get a lot of this knowledge. And to answer the question, Canada's a big country that imports a lot of goods, and we have some fantastic infrastructure. So if you've done any importing into Canada, a lot of the goods come by sea, and they hit a rail network that starts either on the West Coast in Vancouver or on the East Coast in sort of Halifax, St. John's, Montreal. And the goods come through mainly by rail. It's a very, most of the time it works really well and things move very smoothly. And what we've seen with the pandemic and, what Tfo was talking about too, is people have increased by being at home. They're looking around at their newly formed home offices, and they're stuck inside their house for months at a time, and they decide that they don't love their decor, have decided to just renovate or, spruce everything up. And so we've seen just a surge in purchasing and a surge in the volumes. And I think also some of at the higher level for retailers, there was a concern, as we saw in the first few months of the pandemic. In Canada, we had a toilet paper shortage of all things, or it seems like there was a toilet paper shortage because consumers couldn't see it on the shelves. Now, in order to try and, consumers not seeing things on shelves is a big indicator of sort of uncertainty, and it can create a lot of panic. So of course, retailers want to make sure they've got something there, and have started, kind of increasing or advancing the orders of regular inventory just to make sure that there's no panic or fear around shopping. And specifically at the ports, what that means is we started to see, normally there's a seasonal flow to Canadian goods. So we, some of our main holidays fall in the latter part of the year. Our other main sort of shopping milestones might be Mother's Day and Father's Day in the spring. And so we tend to see the seasonal shift of post-Chinese New Year or post-Lunar New Year imports. There's sort of a lull through April and that first and second quarter, and everything starts to ramp up through June, July, August, and into September. Simultaneously, for us, I do consumer goods, we do cosmetics and bath accessories, and but Canadian agriculture is a big industry. So you'll see a lot of food imports take up a lot of space on the rail as well. And with the pandemic, normally, like I said, we would have the seasonal shift. We started to just have all sorts of high volume imports every month. So our last year, it was like October was busy, November is busy, January is full volumes. We had a bit of a lull coming into 2021, but by May, things had started to just increase. which means that at the port, you know, they're able to handle this sort of seasonal capacity normally. But now they're having to do it instead of managing for about 3 months of this burst of volume. It's just been constant. And then we've also had some restrictions. We've had, you know, some labor shortages, some labor changes. And so that congestion at the port leads to longer processing times. So when the boat comes in and it's offloading and going to load on the rail, every step of that process becomes longer. Globally, we've seen a container shortage. So talking about the boxes that everyone moves their goods in, those have had a shortage because sometimes they're ending up at warehouses and everybody's busy. There's a worker shortage, so they're not getting unloaded that quickly. So then those boxes are sitting there and not getting back into the market, which again causes sort of a jam up. So Canada's experiencing essentially the same things that almost every country globally is experiencing. But unfortunately, we're all experiencing this high level congestion, high volume at the same time, which creates, you know, what is our favorite word from the pandemic? Unprecedented. So that's sort of the environment that we're in. And it's sort of affecting, I'm talking a bit about ocean and rail. It's also affecting air shipments. You know, as we've seen, most of us have been at home under stay-at-home orders. So travel has not been a thing. And that affects the availability of air capacity for our cargo. We've also had trucking. You know, there's always talk of sort of a labor shortage in trucking. A lot of people don't want to be truck drivers. So actually getting goods, you know, moving locally in trucks can be a challenge. And the last thing I'll say on this sort of question, when we do small packages, so I'm sure for our SMEs here, you know, you might not be filling a full container box on the ocean, but you might be sending a lot of small packages via, you know, who are the big guys, FedEx, UPS, DHL, Canada Post, other international postal services. Since we're all shopping more online, their volumes have increased. Their capacity to handle these volumes, it's not limitless. So they're facing a lot of congestion challenges, and we're seeing delays. So a package that used to take 2 or 3, maybe 4 days coming from China or Zimbabwe overnight now takes a week, 7 days, 10 days. And the fun part is they've added surcharges to cover and compensate for this high volume. So not only are our businesses being challenged with, you know, deliverable customer service timelines, but also all of our costs have gone up. So it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, that's for sure. So how would you say Canadian buyers are dealing with all the challenges that they're facing at the ports and, you know, and the high transportation costs?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think a lot of us, you know, if you're dealing with larger retailers, you tend to plan a few more months in advance. So you're dealing with orders that have a long project timeline. And with this situation, those timelines have gotten even longer. So buyers, I think, you know, are trying. I mean, the first step is to communicate, right? We're communicating with our customers that this is the situation. It's a global situation. And it's really out of everyone's control. There's no control. Mm-hmm. And then what can you do about it? You can look at different shipping methods. You can look at, you know, shipping partial quantities. You can look at changing your vendor base. So instead of, you know, sometimes we're getting materials from, you know, Taiwan, South Korea, you know, India, Bangladesh, and then maybe changing that to be a bit more local, maybe looking at suppliers in Mexico, you know, if you're in the Canadian market, you know, and just sort of looking at where you can make little changes to try and change your routing. And another thing I think buyers are looking at is, it's something that I've tried to do is expand. You know, I had a couple of partners that I use for my transportation partners, and they're great partners. You know, like we've had a great relationship and great customer service. But in this market, I've needed someone who was a bit bigger or had more access. Mm-hmm. And because it's just, there's so much going on and it's very hard to secure a vessel, to get airspace, to get a courier company. We can't just work with, you know, the sort of tried and true or the one. we've had to really just kind of interact with as many people as we can. And it's been nice to see that the supply chain community and the global trade community have really been collaborating, and we don't have the same aspect of competitiveness. Like, everyone is recognizing that we're all trying to get things into the market and get them to the consumers. We're all trying to stay afloat, you know, and keep our businesses, you know, moving forward. And so there's a lot of collaboration, which is interesting. And the last thing I'll say on that is sort of technical. If you're familiar with Incoterms, something that we've done is Orchard a lot of the time does DDP, which is deliver duty paid, which is getting the goods right to the customer's door, which is a super value add. The customers love it because they don't have to think about anything. But in this market, you know, especially if you're a smaller business, it's very hard for you to leverage volumes to get the space that you need in transportation services and logistics. So if you're working with a larger customer or retailer, they quite likely have the leverage and volume already. And most of them are already using transportation services. So in a situation where you might be having difficulty, changing up the Incoterms that you're using or renegotiating your contract, and giving your larger retailer the option to say, like, look, we're small, you come to us for this product. We're not a logistics, super source. So it might make sense for you to take on moving the transportation of the goods instead of us. And that way you may be able to get them faster or leverage your network, which is a lot larger. So that's a shift from sort of that DDP Incoterm into an FOB term or an FCA term. If you have questions about Incoterms, drop them in the chat. We can talk to you about it. That's a whole other webinar. But that kind of little renegotiation might help. Right. It's the new customer service. It's the new value add, I would say.
Okay. Very good. We're going to have to move on to Lily, but I'm sure that there will be some questions for you. So thank you very much, Audrey, for that. Thanks, obviously, you have lots of knowledge in that whole area. Lily, how has COVID affected the portfolio of exporters that you're working with? I mean, are you looking for other suppliers? Did you have to strategize to fulfill the supply of fruits and vegetables? We have Lily.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay,
it's okay. Sorry about that. Did you hear me okay, Lily?
I hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you. So due to the impact of COVID-19 last year, our food service customers were deeply affected negatively. Food service distribution amounts to 70% of our business. We at Alasco here, we distribute to restaurants, hotels, hospitals, schools, all over Canada, frozen fruits and vegetables. So because of the pandemic, obviously we saw our contracts being canceled, deliveries being pushed out, the schedules were not what we had agreed. We had to certainly find ways to move those products, find alternative customers to avoid potential losses. We had to seek other alternatives, such as repacking the products for retailers, for example, because we saw that the retail business went really up. There was a lot of demand for retail products at the supermarkets. You saw empty shelves everywhere because there was a huge demand, people staying at home, cooking their own meals. So that was good for us, that we had to strategize and find a way to change our business model kind of thing. So we have to seek new alternatives, increase our demand for this type of customers, retailers, industrial customers as well, and that helped us. But it was a critical time for our industry, obviously. In terms of if we are looking for other suppliers, yes, we're constantly looking to expand our supply chain with qualified processors who will meet our North American standards of food safety and QA compliance for the frozen food industry. So yes.
Okay. And how do you usually go about doing that, sourcing the new suppliers?
Well, we contact potential suppliers, we vet them, we have to have certain documentation from them. They have to have the technology that we require for them to process the frozen fruits and vegetables using an IQF machinery. We ask for certifications, we ask for audits, reports, and it's a lot of paperwork for them to have to meet our standards. So.
And what would you say are the main challenges buying from foreign suppliers at this time?
Well, it's been always a challenge, even in normal times. I don't work alone. We have a number of people who is involved in the sourcing process. We have demand planning, we have myself, procurement, QA, food safety, compliance, marketing. We have our finance team, logistics. The main challenges that I've seen lately is the volatile socioeconomic political climate. For example, in countries where we source in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, there's the ever-changing customer needs in the food service and retail industry, the short timelines that we are given for quoting or deliveries, lack of information. There's the short crop seasons due to extreme weather events that are becoming more frequent because of climate change nowadays. This creates commodity shortages, which can causes cost wars. The global container imbalance, as Audrey was explaining before, and obviously that causes the global lack of labor in all sectors. So those are the main challenges, I would say, nowadays.
Okay. And if you had one sort of piece of advice for foreign suppliers to be successful in selling to you, what would that be?
We will be communicating, collaborating, and get as much information, collecting data. I think that way they can be successful getting better opportunities in this industry.
Okay, thank you. And what about the internal challenges that you're facing as a result of the pandemic when products arrive in Canadian ports? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, of course. Well, the main issue right now is the port and the railing backlog. There's too many containers arriving at the port in Vancouver. We bring reefer containers. And it's not as bad as the regular containers. We have a certain priority compared to other industries, to other goods, such as furniture or equipment, because we're in the food industry, there is a certain priority. So I can imagine how hard it might be for other people, for other industries to import, to bring the products in here. Some companies, the employees are overworked, staff is missing. There's a shortage of labor in general, which causes customer service response delays. On the Canadian customs side, we see it takes long for the container to be released at the terminal due to the congestions. And that causes, obviously, costs for us, the demurrage, the detention. So every day there's a charge, and obviously it affects us. Especially in Vancouver, we saw issues due to the wildfires too. There was a threat of strike here in Montreal earlier this year. So because we bring the load from Vancouver by rail, that causes problems sometimes because of these factors.
Okay. Are you, I mean, is there anything that, you know, buyers are doing to get together to lobby, you know, governments, express your concern and request support?
Not really, not really. I don't think so. We are really on our own in the industry. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we want to allow some time for questions from the audience. So thank you very much, Lily. And Rosalind, do you have some questions there?
Can I just say something?
Sure, Maria. Hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Yeah,
Good.
It's been a while. I'd like to emphasize on one thing, and I'm glad Lily has touched upon it a little bit, and that is access of women in SMEs, exporters, access to technology and adoption of technology. I think that is really very important. And now it has been more pronounced during COVID. Technology actually is able to deliver lower operating costs. It would have increased their production capacity, as well as their ability to innovate, and in the end, customer satisfaction. So I think that that is something that most women business people or exporters are quite challenged at. It's the adoption to technology, whether it's digital tech. I mean, now you talk of digital technology, especially as it relates to communications, but there's also a lot of digital technology now involved in production, and all the way to logistics and all that, the whole supply chain. So I just would like to add that.
Yeah, no, some very, very good points. Rosalind, do you have any other any questions from the audience?
It appears that there weren't very much questions. There's a discourse going on in the chat box. So if you guys have any questions to ask, now would be the good time to put them in the chat box and I can read them out.
Rosalind, Susan, I have a question, and it's either for Audrey or maybe Lily, but it's mostly to express a concern or maybe on behalf of the SMEs exporters and what we hear and what they receive, okay? I know planning is important. Rose has indicated that planning may be extra days ahead, but we don't have crystal ball for this, but what is in the future? Is this going to stay? Is this the new pattern? I mean, is it going to improve? For an SME, it's already challenging in normal circumstances to export to Canada. Now it's even worse with the delay in the ports and all these obstacles. So is it going to improve maybe in a medium term? Short term?
Who wants to look into that crystal ball? Audrey?
I mean, I think that's been part of, I would say that's been the thing that I've been challenged by the most. I'll be really honest with you. I think I thought this pandemic, I don't know, I've never lived through one before. I thought it would end a lot faster than it has. Like, it still keeps going. And I think a lot of us, you know, you're trying to plan long term. I mean, we plan with some customers, I mean, just 8 months in advance. We're talking about Mother's Day next spring. We're talking about what's happening in the summer. And I follow a lot of really insightful people in the kind of ocean kind of marketplace and that, and it's not looking great. Like, it is long term, like into, I mean, well past into 2022. Even into 2023. And that means that it's not a temporary problem anymore. It's now something we have to completely adapt our supply chains and even in some cases our business models too. So yeah, I would say we've all wanted to be a bit optimistic, but I think a business who can really assume that this is going to be ongoing and make an adaptable plan for what they could do next or how they could shift, I think that's sort of where we're going to have to go.
I concur, Audrey, if I may. This was in one of my last blog posts. This was one of the issues I looked at, and a lot of the data and information I saw projected that the earliest that we could expect this kind of superstorm, I guess you want to call it, confluence of all of these issues, the pandemic, the labor shortages, the shipping, the blockage at the ports, etc., to continue at the earliest into 2023. So we're talking about sometime, and who knows what else is going to happen. So I definitely concur with Audrey's point, and I think so. There was an example that was shared where there was a ship that was arriving to unload. I think it traveled from Indonesia to China. When it got to China, one of the workers was tested positive for COVID. So they had to go back, change crew, and then come back, adding, I think, a 2 months delay or something like that. So, you don't know what unknowns are going to crop up in a system that is already maxed out in terms of its abilities. And to that end, I would like to say that I really do think it's important for organizations like OIT, for entities like Tfo Canada, to really pay attention to the SMEs, and help the SMEs to begin to adapt to this new world, because what I am seeing is new gaps opening up, right? There's an exchange in the chat about the availability of new technologies, etc. Great for those who, can access it. And could it also be a situation where we have the gaps that already exist begin to widen even further? I think that is something that we absolutely, absolutely have to pay attention to.
Thank you. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we're arriving at the end of our time now. I think, Marisabel, I turn it back over to you, and thank you so much to all of the panelists. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody, and all the panelists, Andrea, Stephanie. Thank you for taking the time and participate in this webinar. Interesting, more to do. Okay, we already have enough, but I guess we have more to do as a Tfo Canada, as Andrea indicated, to support the SMEs. IFA, Maria, you also have more to do. I would say it's not looking promising, but we need to adapt. and we'll make it happen. I think that's our work here, okay, on this side. We make it happen. But thank you, everybody, for being here with us and for taking your time. And as Rosalind say, a reminder that a survey will be going out after this session. We appreciate your feedback, because that's how we try to find topics that are of interest for the next webinars to keep you guys updated and informed. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the week, and we see each other soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.